Hey, it's Brenda and Shay back for another episode of Wedding Business TV, and we're going to talk about a topic today that I will admit I've probably beaten to death on a few occasions, but we're going to do it again. And I'm talking about your contact information because I cannot overemphasize how important it is to make it as easy as possible for people to contact you. That is the whole purpose, really, of why you have a website. Obviously, it's to inform, but ultimately, at the end of the day, your call to action is for people to pick up the phone or to shoot you an email and to reach out and actually take the next step with you. So ensuring that your contact information is well presented and it's as professional as possible is of the utmost importance. So, it's also a topic you and I talk a lot about, and we rant about, and we gripe about.
We do. Sometimes even more than SEO.
Yeah, I know. Hard to believe. It's kind of one of my pet peeves because it's not something that is technical. It's not something that requires a huge learning curve. You just have to do it. You just have to understand what is needed, and then you just have to actually take the steps to do it. And I think the biggest one that stands out for us, one of the biggest ones that stands out is the email address. And I still see Gmails and Hotmails and AOL. And does AOL exist still? I don't know.
Hotmail.
Yeah. And, locally here we have TELUS and Shaw and things like that. And honestly, I mean, the pushback I often get sometimes is, well, my business name is in the part before the @ symbol. I don't care.
Nope.
It's fair or not, it is leaving a first impression that you are not an
real business.
Official real business. Yes. And I mean, that's not just my opinion. I have talked to wedding couples.
Yes.
And they're all saying the same thing. They want to know that that their day is in good hands.
Beyond that, just beyond the wedding industry, anytime I go to a website, whatever I'm looking for, it could be for anything.
Any industry.
If it's like that, my initial reaction is, do I want to email these people?
Yeah. Is this a side project? What is this? Is this really a business? And it's not expensive. It's not like I'm asking you to put $100 a month into something. I mean, literally, we're talking about if you set up an address through Google's business mail services, you're looking at $5 a month. And I don't know about you, but I easily drop that at Starbucks every single week. Yeah. And I'd rather, put aside one of the lattes and actually have a business email address that is going to create more trust from the outset.
I agree.
So, and you don't have to do it through Google's business email services. A lot of hosting companies will let you do it as well. I mean, that's a topic for another day in terms of the fact that I highly, highly, highly recommend that you separate your email hosting from your website hosting, and I'll talk about that another time. So I do recommend using a specific email hosting provider, but even if you're just not able to do that yet, your hosting company can probably get that set up.
I know in a previous episode where we interviewed
Tanya.
Yeah, she talked about going, and she preferred the email address over the form.
Absolutely.
And I prefer the form over the email address from this is not even an SEO perspective, but you get increased spam if you just have your email address on there. And here's how. Yeah, you can. And here's why. Have you ever heard of people scraping websites?
Yeah, of course.
So they can scrape the website and they scrape your email address and then they dump it, and then that's when you start getting spammed. I'm not saying don't do it.
No,
I'm just saying.
And that's definitely a pet peeve is when people only have a form. I think the reality of being in business is that you can expect to get a certain level of spam. Now, if you've got an unmanageable amount, or even, I mean, honestly, if I'm getting a handful of them a day, I'm annoyed, and it means that I need to look at my spam filter settings. If you have a decent quality email hosting provider, they'll have mechanisms in place to curb that. So I've got my email addresses everywhere as you can imagine, and I really only get a handful of them. And I'll say the email address, I use a couple of different email hosting providers. The email account that is hosted through Google, which is my wedding business website's email address, I don't think I get a lick of spam on there.
Here's another reason I like forums. Now, I like it because you can control what people are doing and what they receive. So if they just take your email address and they throw it in their Gmail or Outlook or whatever and they send it to you, that's one thing. But whenever I set up a form, I can have a redirect to a thank you page. I can control what they see and the information they get.
And I think the takeaway from that is, I mean, you prefer forms, I prefer
Yeah,
email because
exactly.
I don't like being
I know.
controlled.
I know.
So it's important to understand that different people respond
Yeah, I get it.
differently, and you cover all your bases. I mean, have your email address. And people seem to forget, and it's funny, I still see some websites that don't even have a phone number on it. You have to have a phone number.
Have to have make it, where they can find it. You can
Make
put
it
it in the
where they can find
footer. You
it.
can put it in the header.
And
Uh,
it's funny, I mean, the thing about the phone number is I actually just did a recording this week with Megan Ely from OFD Consulting, and that's going to be a free online workshop that, well, I guess by the time this episode airs, it'll probably already have passed. But we were talking about branding through the client experience, and Megan had a really good point about the fact that you're not always just dealing with a wedding couple, you're also dealing with potentially a mother of the bride or a mother of
mhm.
the groom, or and you have different, it's often a multi-generational sort of situation, so they may be looking at your website as well, and they may be more likely to want a phone number immediately rather than email or
Exactly.
a form. So you want to cover all your bases.
Here's another thing I always do. I always make it clickable.
The phone
The
number.
phone number, and
Oh, and I've got a good story for you about this. So this just happened. Make sure if it's clickable that it's working properly. Test
mhm,
it.
exactly.
My husband and I were car shopping this weekend. I'm happy to
Mm,
to re- to report. Um,
finally.
oh, we're overdue for a lovely new vehicle. So, but the point is that we were on the Audi Canada's website, looking under the
Look
find.
at you.
Yeah, that's dude. I have done without a vehicle for quite a long time. I've done my eco-friendly, all that. Actually, it's a hybrid, so it's eco-friendly as well. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is that we were looking at the dealer listing on their website, and there were a bunch of them listed in the area because we wanted to call around because there's an availability issue on this particular model. It's apparently much more popular than Audi Canada had anticipated. So we were calling around, and my husband Jason was getting, this number's not in service messages, and then he kept getting somebody who kept saying hello, and it
Uh,
didn't seem, and we're thinking, what the heck is going on here? So we realized he gave me his phone. It had been too bright to see some of the information on his screen. And I went in, I was looking at it, and I'm like, why in the hell are we calling Malaysia?
oh,
So the local area code here is 604. And what was happening is the way it was set up, it was dialing international code 60 and then the number.
4.
So we called some poor woman in Malaysia, like probably in the middle of the night a couple of times. The tap to call was not set up properly. So I got home, I immediately messaged them and said, you have a problem, you need to look at this. Imagine how many people have been trying to call dealerships in the Vancouver area,
Yes.
and we're
Now,
getting that. So
whenever let's say you add your phone number to the header or to the footer or, on the sidebar or on your contact page, it doesn't automatically become clickable. There's a code. In some instances, it could, depending on if it's a plugin or something. Most of the time, it's not.
it depends how your site's been set up.
Exactly. So I have a code that I use on my sites, and I'll add it to the somewhere on the page somewhere so
Yeah.
people can get it and they can use it on their website.
So, but I mean, even when you do these changes, so even when you have your form set up and you have your tap to call set up, test things, because
Exactly.
forms can break. Hosting settings can change, and suddenly forms are not working. And the last thing you want to find out is 3, 4, 6, 12 months later, oh my gosh, my form's not working. When did that stop? So
Yeah.
keep an eye on that. Test your phone number. You don't want to find out that people are calling Malaysia.
Exactly.
So, um, so those are some of the key things around your contact information. But I think one of the last things I wanted to mention is it's an opportunity to manage expectations on the contact page. I know that when we had talked to Tanya, it comes back to that whole issue of responsiveness and when
Mm-hmm.
people expect to hear from them. You can use that as an opportunity on your contact page to show a little personality, but also to let them know when they can expect to hear from you. If you're only available on business days, let them know that. If you are regularly unavailable on Fridays and Saturdays, let them know. But tell them when they can expect to hear from you, and then obviously stick to that. But I think that way people are not going to be grumbling when if they
Mm-hmm.
email you on a Saturday morning, they don't hear back from you until Monday.
I got two quick things. One, I like to use redirects to a thank you page if they're using the form. That's where I said I like to
Yeah.
control it. So if they're using the form, I always try to redirect to a thank you page, and that's where I can be a little bit more personal. I can have some funny copy or whatever. I make sure I have a picture so they can connect with a person. That's also when I can kind of establish some expectations of how this is going to go. I can say expect a phone call in the next 2 hours, or expect a
Yeah.
a phone call or email within 24 hours. Also, I don't want them to just leave. I always include some kind of action, not necessarily call to action, but an action. I say, you may want to read this particular blog because it's one of our most viewed blogs. So try to get them back on your
Engage them.
website. Exactly. Engage
Engage
them.
them. Don't
And
abandon them.
or at least say, like my Facebook page, or something
Yeah.
like that. Get something else out of them. And the other thing I want to say is I don't always just include contact forms on the contact page. If I will include it
Yeah.
in other pages, if I think it's important enough that that's the call to action and so instead of having
Booking an appointment or a
yeah, a
consultation or
button, instead of having a button or just some link excuse me, that goes to the contact page, I have it right there so they can fill it
yeah.
out.
And there's different ways to do that. I mean, you can have it right there. I've used there's a WordPress sliding widget that I have used. Oh, we'll let the man cough. I've used this sliding widget on a number of sites, and it's just one of these things that blends into the branding.
Hmm.
I turn it off. We turn it off for mobile because it's not
Yeah.
responsive, so we don't have it on there. But at least on desktop, it's there, and it slides open. It has the form right there, so when people are ready to take that next
Hmm.
step, it's there. So depending on the platform that you have and what your goals are, it may or may not be the right fit for you. But I think something else wanted to
Don't.
mention about the contact information that I just occurred to me. And it's funny that we don't even think about this as a key piece of contact information anymore, because it's really not necessarily, and that's your physical address.
Oh yeah.
It does make you look more established if you have a physical address listed, but I totally get that a lot of people are home based and they do
Home
not want to
based.
share that anymore. I work out of my home. That is not
Yes.
my home address that is on my website, let me tell you.
From an SEO perspective, yes, it's good
Yeah.
because they call it the NAP, the name, address, phone number, and whatever you put on your Google Business, my business page, is if you can put that exactly the way you have it on there on your citations or wherever on your website, it just basically reinforces Google that these match up. These are the same things.
Right.
Now, my wife works out of our house. We don't have our home address, but I think I may have it just the city, state, and zip code. So instead of the actual street address, I will include like the city, state, and zip code and have that match up on the
Right.
other things.
So
So,
there's other options, and the good thing about that is that at least it confirms the geographic area that you're based in. And I'm still surprised
mhm,
how many websites I come across that it's not clear at all where they service. And I think there's just an assumption that somehow people will know, but not necessarily. You really need to be
no,
clear where you're based and where you serve. Having a physical address it's not having one is not a deal breaker. And there are options. There's a lot of virtual office providers out there, and depending
mhm,
where you're based,
yeah.
you may have a lot of choice or you may have very little choice. So you don't have to have it. It does have a benefit, but at least tell us kind of where you're based.
one last thing, and I know we need to go.
Yeah. Let's wrap this
The
up.
the form, if you're using a form, which I still think you should have a form with your email address, don't require too much information for them to fill
Yes,
out.
absolutely.
I mean, if you have 10 items and you require their information, exact information, it can
Wedding
deter
date, how
people.
many people in your
Exactly.
party, with blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
At least if you have some that don't make it
Don't make it
required,
mandatory. Yeah.
but I think you should look at it and realistically see what information you have to contact them, and just get some basic information. The less, I think, the better.
The less the better. And I think typically you're going to see higher conversion rates as well if you're asking for less information. And I know that a lot of people want to use the forms to streamline their own systems to collect certain information before they have that initial call. But you have to decide what is of more importance to you, having that information or potentially closing or getting a lead that might
Yeah.
not otherwise have filled that information out. And in some cases, it may be more important to you to have that information. If you are in high demand and leads
Exactly.
are not an issue for you and you really need to streamline your processes, then that's a different situation. But if the scenario that you're in is I need more leads and I do a good job of building that relationship once I get them on the phone, then don't be asking for their entire, life history through your form.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I think we've probably
Beat that one enough again.
Yeah. Hey, folks, when I stop seeing Hotmail addresses on websites, I'll stop talking about this. Until
That's
that
good.
day, you can expect this to be an issue that I bring up periodically. But
So we'll
anyways.
be talking about this for a while.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
eventually you'll hear this again. But for now, we'll wrap it up there, and
Okay.
we'll see you in our next episode.
Cool.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.